All right, so now we're going to talk about speeding up and slowing down. So speeding up is when you have positive velocity and you give it positive acceleration, like when you're driving along and you hit the accelerator, you speed up. So when they're both positive, it kind of makes sense. I'm not going to try to illustrate with both negative, but if they're both negative, that's the same thing. You're speeding up. So slowing down is when velocity and acceleration will have opposite signs. All right, so that means I need two graphs. So I need to have the graph of the velocity. So to graph v of t, I want to make sure you're labeling your graphs, right? So factor out the t, so I get t minus 3, so 0 and 3. That's the velocity. Okay, so let's go find acceleration. So the acceleration is the derivative. So that would be 2t minus 3. So that's down here, negative 3. So where it would cross would be 3 halves right there. So that's your acceleration graph. All right, so I need to find out, and the interval doesn't say. Okay, so here's 0, right? And here's 0. So before 0, the velocity graph is positive. Before 0, the acceleration graph is negative. So that means it must be slowing down from negative infinity to 0 because they're opposite signs. All right, let's look between 0 and 3 halves. So 0 and 3 halves, this graph is negative, this graph is negative. So that must mean that it's speeding up between 0 and 3 halves because they're both the same sign. So between 3 halves and 3, this graph is below the x-axis. Here's 3, this graph is above the x-axis, so it must be slowing down between 3 halves and 3. And then from 3 on, they're both positive. So from 3 on, they're speeding up. All right. So this is similar, only I'm beginning with the position. We're never going to graph the position. Never going to ask you to graph a cubic. So first off, you need to go find the velocity. So that's 3t squared minus 6t. So again, I can factor out a 3t, t minus 2. So I know it crosses at 0 and 2. So there's my velocity. All right, let's get the acceleration, which is a derivative, 6t minus 6. So it looks like this. And this would be 1. Make sure I label my graphs. Okay, so we've got to find the slowing down and speeding up intervals. Okay. So before 0, this graph is positive. Before 0, this graph is negative. So between negative infinity and 0, it must be slowing down. All right, so here's 1. So between 0 and 1, this graph is negative. This graph is negative. So between 0 and 1, they're speeding up. They have the same sign. All right, so here's 2. Between 1 and 2, this graph is negative, this graph is positive, so it must be slowing down. After 2, this graph is positive, this graph is positive, so 2 on, it must be speeding up. All right, one more. Actually, this has lots to it, so let's go back to this one in the next video.